through the forest, I don't wear no boot, 'cause I'm the living legend that they call Bigfoot. Hey, and taking my time, I don't wear no watch, 'cause I'm the timeless creature that they call Sasquatch. You may not believe a creature like me could be living near you.
Beyond those knuckles. So the toes are pretty long. Okay. Another one to illustrate this, another aspect of this. Western Washington, Grays Harbor County, Deputy Sheriff Dennis Hereford makes a cast of this remarkable footprint made under ideal conditions. You can see the example out on the table. There were also some half tracks in association where it was running back to the trees, apparently spooked by somebody coming onto the side. The anatomical landmarks are so clear in this that I can see the head and the base of the fifth metatarsal. I can see the bulge right here that marks the joint capsule of the calcaneo-cuboid joint. That marks the transverse tarsal joint, or the midfoot, the axis of midfoot flexion. And so when the heel is flexed up and just the forefoot is impressed, then look, lo and behold, it terminates right there at the transverse tarsal joint. Now, what's also really remarkable about this is look at the superimposition here. The half track has expanded out beyond the margins of the full-length track, because when it's running, landing on just the front half of the foot, the weight, the pressure per unit area on that foot is increased, and that causes the sole pad to expand, displace laterally even further. Again, I mean, the anatomical detail, I don't know, can you hear the excitement? I just, you know, it's to the point where for someone to just suggest that these were all made by a family of the Wallaces carving wooden feet and tromping around the Pacific Northwest is just so ludicrous that it's laughable that people still suggest that. Here's another example. I had this out, someone made off with this particular, the full-length one, but the half-track is still out there. I cast these outside of Walla Walla in 1996. Again, the half-track, the proportionality agrees with that of other tracks that show this feature, and you can see too that it doesn't just terminate randomly, but there is this angle. This very same, let me pop back here, I shouldn't go backwards, but if you look right here, notice the slight angle. This ridge doesn't run just straight across. It angles from more proximal on the medial side of the foot to a little more distal on the lateral side of the foot. That's because, as you can see here, it's going back this direction because the talonavicular joint sits a little bit further forward. And so the point of pivoting or rotation is a little bit further back here. And so it shows up here in that fashion. I draw that attention to that here because for another reason here. Here's another nail in the argument here, or another brick, I guess, in a better way than the foundation, sorry. Better than, we don't want to nail it in the coffin. China has stories of wild men. The Chinese word yeren simply means that, wild men. And here's one artist's depiction, a Chinese artist's depiction of what that wild woman looks like. Kind of an experience very similar to what Bob Gimlin had here. I had the privilege of going over there. We met with a witness who was a park ranger who had a sighting. Very interesting sighting. Saw it at some distance, but very clear, unobstructed view in daylight. It was laying on top of this big boulder, sunning itself. He thought it was an odd-colored bear. He yelled at it. It sat up and turned and looked at him. And no snout, no ears on top. Slid off the boulder and walked away on two legs. So he hustled after it, tried to track it, found where it stopped at a spring. And in the muddy bank of the spring, it squatted down, flexing its foot. They wouldn't let me look at the casts until they had the cameras rolling because they wanted to capture my initial reaction. And so as we're driving off to the site where we were going to have the interview, I gave him a reprint of one of my papers, and it had that illustration with the three views of the track from the Patterson-Gimlin film site showing the pressure ridge. He saw that picture. He couldn't read the English, but he saw that picture. Got really excited. Grabs my jacket and starts thumping and pointing to this picture. I said, okay, okay. Well, when he unveils them, here they were. Here you can see it better. It's a little hard because of the lighting was a little diffused. It was a cloudy day. I couldn't get some strong shadows. But you, like here you can see it really well. Here's that furrow, but even notice the anatomy. This bulge here is formed by the tuberosity of the navicular. I mean, we can correlate the anatomy. There it is, that same shape, that kind of heart shape right there. There's the tuberosity of the navicular, and the ridge running off at a slight angle so that it's a little more distal on the on the lateral side. This guy had no clue about Sasquatch. He asked me, is there anything like the Yeren in the United States through an interpreter? I said, well, as a matter of fact, I think there is. The fact that this footprint so remarkably reflects the anatomy of the mid-tarsal break is just absolutely convincing to me. So, what's the connection? Is it the same species? Well, it's interesting. I've collected a lot of different evidence and anecdotes of footprints, particularly footprints, not just the stories, from all over Asia, obviously. And I've had the chance to go to China. I've had the chance to go to the Caucasus and meet with some of the Russians. I got to New Delhi only to have civil unrest break out in one of the provinces here, and I arrived in the dark and had to board a plane to leave in the next morning before the sun came up. My wife was in tears. She said, you were all the way to India. She said, I've got a whole list of things. You just stay there for another week on your own time. She said, the Taj Mahal is only 30 minutes away by train. I said, honey, I'm not going anywhere by myself. We pulled up at the hotel, and they brought the mirrors out to go underneath the car, and it had a double gate. That was after we came through the first gate, and they looked and checked for bombs, and then we went through this second gate, and then they x-rayed all my luggage before I could go in the lobby of the hotel. And it was the hotel was surrounded by a 10-foot fence with razor wire all the way around. So I'm not going anywhere by myself. But anyway, I was on an airplane on another time, and I opened up the magazine, and there was an article about the imperiled status of the Asiatic tiger. And they had a map similar to this one. It wasn't this particular one, but similar to this. Here's the distribution of tigers in the lighter orange as of 1900. By 1990, the habitat has been reduced to these fragments. Now, the tiger requires wet forests. It needs proximity to water. They're pretty adaptable. Some of them also exploit grasslands and so forth. They still need to have places to den, places that they can find cover, and lots of water. And what's interesting is, what struck me was these were the same places I was getting evidence in the form of footprints of a Sasquatch-like creature, which also needs heavy cover, forests, lots of water. So whether it's up here in the Pamir Mountains, or the peaks in Tajikistan, or here in China, or in Vietnam, or Malaysia, or the Mande Barung in India, or the foothills of the Himalayas, not the Yeti of the high Himalayas, but in the foothills they have, this was a track that was found by Josh Gates. This was a fascinating one from the Caucasus, the 17-inch track that looks just like a Sasquatch track. We went back on my last trip to Russia. We were able to get the mate to it and interview the witnesses that had seen it, seen this long line of tracks in mud and snow. So, not the great chain of being, but looking at evolutionary, now we have a different sort of missing link. And the number of missing links has continued to grow. When we, early on, all they could do was compare us to our nearest living neighbor, which was the chimpanzee. A lot of difference there, obviously. But when you consider all the extinct missing links in this chain, it's remarkable the number of intermediates that actually exist. Australopithecus afarensis looks like a chimpanzee with long legs. Now it's funny, when one of the experts who examined the Patterson-Gimlin film said, it's inconceivable that such a chimera would exist in nature. From the waist up, it looks like a gorilla. From the waist down, it looks like a human. You know, such a combination would never occur in nature. This was in 1967, 68. Well, in the 70s, Australopithecus afarensis was discovered. And guess what? From the waist up, it looks like a chimpanzee. From the waist down, it looks like a human. Inconceivable that such a combination would ever exist in nature. Until you discover it. So, there you go. So the tree has grown tremendously. Now, two sides to a thematic coin here to bear in mind as we place this whole thing now into context. As the fossil record of human evolution continues to grow, one of the things that's very evident is that at any slice of time, there were multiple species of hominids alive on the landscape. And this isn't even showing the hominoids, the apes, which the fossil record for which is growing and growing and growing as well, too. But just look at the hominids. So if you went back in time, if you had a time machine, let's say we went back just 20,000 years ago into Eastern Asia, you might run into Homo floresiensis, this little hobbit. You would find specimens of Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis. If you went a little further, well, you know, now you don't have to go too far back to the west, you'd run into Homo neanderthalensis. Homo denisova. This one here hasn't been formally identified yet, but a population that the authors suggest is a distinct population, perhaps worthy of species designation, the red deer hominids. Likewise, Gigantopithecus for a long time had the distinction of being the only fossil form other than chimps, gorillas, and orangs that had survived well into the Pleistocene. But then teeth that had previously been attributed to Homo erectus, found alongside Gigantopithecus, are now being attributed to Lufenpithecus, which was a gorilla-sized ape. So at least one more contemporary, and that list is probably going to grow of apes that persisted way up into the Pleistocene. Okay? So lots of diversity, lots of contemporaneity, lots of lineages that have persisted well up to the present, such that one really has to ask, you know, as the title of this book suggests, are we really the only hominid species? This one suggests we are. How we came to be the only humans on Earth. Lone survivors. And this is the theme. It was funny. The Learning Channel, TLC, I think it was TLC, or maybe it was NOVA, had a series called Becoming Human. And they were exploring this theme of contemporaneity of species in the past. And then the final episode was called The Last Hominid Standing. And what did they argue? They said, well, why would we be the last one? Well, it's our intelligence, it's our tool, our culture, our tools and technology, and so forth, and our, you know, our dominance over the environment. Well, back when Homo erectus was thought to be the last of a linear evolution leading to us, it was argued that they were different than the earlier Australopithecines, for which we knew there were multiple species, because they were just bipedal chimps. But here we have Homo. Because of its intelligence and technology, it was the only one. It was the last surviving hominid that persisted to the present in our current form. As soon as they had that well established in the textbooks, then it was found that Australopithecines were right alongside, and that Homo habilis was persisting right alongside Homo erectus. There were at least 6 species, perhaps, contemporaneous at that time. And so what was called the single species hypothesis was kicked out, but now that argument's been shoved to the present. Well, why would now be an exception to the rule that had prevailed for 7 million years? Especially in view of the fact that there are so many other reports of potential relic hominoids. Now, some people are starting to think about that, the fallacy of that argument. Recently, New Scientist had a feature series of articles which the cover story listed as Human Evolution, the 10 biggest questions. And question number 9, are other hominins alive today? Now, they kind of didn't give it quite the positive treatment I would have hoped, but there are all these reports on these various continents of different types of other potential relic hominoids, whether it's Sasquatch, whether it's the European wildman, the Yeti, the Yeren, the Orang Pendek, or the Endutu, or the Mande Barung of India. And so that's why I've launched this journal called the Relic Hominoid Inquiry, which you can look up online, and it is a refereed online journal, peer-reviewed, with articles, reviews, commentaries that provides a venue for discussion of these topics. Okay, I think we'll stop there.
You might see me running around the bend, but when you get there you say, where are you, friend? I'm nearby, but you don't get the hint, 'cause you're busy pouring plaster in my Bigfoot prints. Hey, running through the forest, I don't wear no